And welcome back. Rusty here with the Rugby Review, and I am here to take you through week 2 of the Autumn International Test Series going on around in the rugby universe right now. And with that being said, let's jump right into the first game here. The first game that was on slate for last weekend was Ireland versus Japan. So we had Ireland 41 versus Japan scoring 10. So let's jump right in to the stats. We have Ireland in the black ink and Japan in the red ink. And as we review this, what we're going to see is Ireland just overall played a better game on both sides of the ball and were able to take their scoring opportunities when they were presented to them. So if we zoom in on the top half here, you can look at possession, you can look at territory. Both are definitely favored towards the Irish side of things. And then if you look down at the bottom of the slide here at meters gained and turnovers won. We have meters gained offensive stat, turnovers won defensive stat. We have 575 meters gained for Ireland versus 373 for Japan, showcasing that the Irish were able to find the holes in the defense of Japan and were able to make their fast break opportunities and break opportunities. In addition, you look at turnovers won. You have 8 turnovers at the breakdown for Ireland versus just 2 for Japan. Ireland with 4 times the amount of opportunities of stopping Japan's offensive flow and then turning that defense into offense. The last thing that I want to look at is all the way down here at the bottom, clean breaks or fast break opportunities. You have 10 clean breaks for Ireland versus just 3 for Japan, showcasing Ireland is able to find holes and gaps in the defensive line of the Japanese, and they were able to take the opportunity to get 10 fast break, 10 clean break opportunities, which, they scored, I think, about 6 tries this week, and you get 10 clean breaks. That's 10 opportunities leading to 6 scoring tries. So, good week for Irish rugby here, and then another tough loss for Japan, coming on the back of a very lopsided loss against South Africa last week. But, every one of the players on the Japanese rugby team, plus the head coach, knows if you aren't going to play teams like Ireland or South Africa, you're never really going to jump to those higher levels of competition. So this is the necessary evil for Japan in order to see them continuously improve as the years go on. Our next matchup here, I'm going to say this is probably one of 2 marquee matchups of the week. We have Scotland versus New Zealand. Scotland 17, New Zealand 25. Now, as we look at the stat sheet here, if you got an opportunity to watch this game, this was a very close game, very competitive, physical, it was emotionally intense for both teams. And for a spectator's view, it was just a lot of fun to watch. As we're going to go through here, a lot of these stats, both for offense and defense, were very, very comparable, very similar. There weren't big differences between the two. And, I always try and look at the stats and see where's the edge and what stat is kind of like, this could be the reason why this team won. So, as we look through these, you see possession and territory both favored towards Scotland. New Zealand was playing a little bit more defense, making more tackles. Slightly, very, very slightly more effective on offense with their meters gained. 11 more meters gained than Scotland for New Zealand. But what I want to zoom in on is the bottom half here and hone in on turnovers won and clean breaks. turnovers won, there's 4 turnovers won for Scotland, 7 turnovers won for New Zealand, 7 times for New Zealand where their defense is taking the ball from Scotland's offense, and then they can immediately transition into offense for New Zealand. And if you look all the way down at the bottom, clean breaks. 7 clean breaks for New Zealand, 4 for Scotland. Again, it may not seem like a lot, but there wasn't a lot between these teams in this matchup. So it could just be something as simple as turning the ball over at rucks and getting more clean breaks. That might be all it takes to get one team an advantage over another. Moving to our next game, it ended up being a very dominant performance by England over Fiji, but the first 40 minutes were very intense, very close, and as you could imagine, extremely physical between these two. So let's look at the stat line here, and what we're going to see is another week of England playing more defense than the opposition. However, every opportunity England got on offense, they were much more efficient and much more effective with it. So if we just zoom in on the top half here, I think this will kind of drive home the point, especially if you look at tackles made. You have 157 tackles made for England versus 115 for Fiji. Again, just showcasing England's playing a little bit more defense during the course of the game than Fiji is. But if you look at the bottom of the slide here, we have meters gained, 514 meters gained for England versus just 295 for Fiji. Again, just to reiterate the point, yes, there was a lot of defense being played by England this game. However, when they did have that ball, they were much more effective and much more efficient with it, and they were able to get a lot more scoring opportunities. Now, the one thing that also did kill Fiji in this game was their discipline. They ended up getting 2 yellow cards, I believe, during the course of the game, and it was the second yellow card in the second half that was the straw that broke the camel's back for Fiji, so to speak. And once that happened, that's really when England started stretching out their lead in the second half. So, good win for England, gives them a lot of good momentum rolling into the New Zealand game this weekend. Fiji left some on the table there, so to speak, and if they can improve their discipline for the upcoming games that they have, could see a reverse in fortune, and they could start, putting together a winning streak here. Next game, kind of an upset here, or at least to me this is an upset. You have Italy versus Australia. Italy scoring 26 versus Australia scoring 19. This game was played in Italy, and this was a really good victory for Italian rugby, kind of showcasing they are good enough to beat the top tier 1 nations. I understand Australia is kind of going through a transition period here. However, still a good win for Italy, showcasing they can compete with some of the Southern Hemisphere. So if we look at the stat line here, we have Italy in the blue ink, Australia in the black ink, and I'm just going to zoom in on the top half here to start. What I find interesting is how dominant in possession and territory Australia was and how much defense the Italian team was playing. So you can see possession and territory, again, both favor Australia in the black ink here. And look at this tackles made stat, 206 tackles for Italy versus just 97 for Australia, which just a gigantic difference there. I mean, yeah, just absolutely massive, gigantic difference there in tackles made. Great defensive effort by the Italian team. And I will say, I think this just is Australia being very ineffective and inefficient with their ball. Because if you look down at meters gained here, you have 349 meters gained for Italy versus 382 for Australia. I would figure a team that's making 200 plus tackles versus a team making less than 100, you wouldn't see the meters gain stat being so, I mean, it's not perfectly even, but it's really not too lopsided either. I would figure Australia would have had 500 plus meters gained or something like that when you're seeing so much more defense played by Italy and so much offense played by Australia. Now, to continue with this stat line here, the one that I want to look at is penalties conceded on this particular slide. 7 penalties conceded for Italy versus 12 for Australia. May not seem like too big of a difference, but this was just a one-score game. You have Italy with 7 penalties versus 12 for Australia. Not only is Australia being pretty inefficient and ineffective with the ball that they had on offense, but their slight ill discipline bit them in the butt by the end of the game here. So that would be one thing to see good for improvement for Australia, is can they be more lethal and effective with the offensive ball that they have? And you have to give Italy all credit where credit is due. Played a great game. Were on defense a lot, but when they did get that ball, very efficient, very effective with it, and took all their opportunities that they had. Moving on, we're going to have our second marquee matchup of the week here. Not nearly as close as the first one, but we have France versus South Africa. Big game here. 2 top-tier teams in the world going head-to-head. You have France 17, South Africa 32. Very close game, but it was about, if I remember correctly, I think it was like 65, 70 minutes in, where you could just tell the French team, just the gas tank had just gone on empty. And they weren't able to keep up with the pace of play that South Africa was maintaining during the entire course of the game. So if we look at our stats here, possession territory, ever so slightly favored towards France. Tackle stats, significantly lower than I would have ever expected, like both teams well under 100 tackles during the entire game here, which not something I see too often. So pretty impressive to see both teams, I guess, just playing a lot of offense during this game. It didn't feel like it when I was watching it, but also there was kind of a lot of missed tackles by both teams here, so not great defensive discipline. But if we zoom in, kind of look down towards the bottom half of the stat sheet here, especially with meters gained and penalties conceded. Now, meters gained just showcasing that South Africa a little bit more effective, a little bit more efficient with their offensive chances that they had. If you look down at penalties conceded, to me this will probably be the biggest differentiator for this whole stat sheet here. You have 13 penalties conceded for France versus just 7 for South Africa. Discipline. It's always important, but it makes even more of a difference when it's at the international stage, especially. You have France giving away almost 2 times the amount of penalties to South Africa. South Africa is way too good of a team where you just simply can't give away almost twice the amount of penalties and expect to good outcome to happen for you. So, tough, well-fought victory for South Africa this week. A little bit to be desired for France in this game, but just like Fiji, if France can get their discipline increased a little bit heading into next week, probably going to have a much better outcome with the game. Now moving on to the next game here. Wales versus Argentina. Now, I know, just like everybody else knows, that Wales is going through a bit of a transition here. And Argentina is really trying to establish themselves as top 5 in the world. Definitely competitive in the Southern Hemisphere with the likes of New Zealand and South Africa. This game kind of put a stamp on it that Argentina, yes, is that good. But I also like the fact that Wales was able to score 4 tries during the course of the game, because it's showcasing that they do have an offensive system that they're able to use somewhat effectively. It's the defense that, oddly for Wales not having good defense, but the defense is what was lacking this past week for Wales. And so let's look at the stat sheet here. We have Wales in the black ink, Argentina with the blue ink. And, before we zoom in, I really want to hone in on the meters gained stat. Just a huge difference between the two teams. If we look up above that really quick, possession territory, yes, did favor Argentina a little bit, but not, it's not this drastic difference between the two teams on possession and territory. Wales, yes, playing a little bit more defense than Argentina, but both are making, a considerable number of tackles here. Now, if we zoom in on the bottom half here, to me, this is really where we are going to see Argentina being very, very effective offensively and taking a lot of opportunities offensively when they had it. So just look at the top of the slide here, meters gained. 361 meters gained for Wales, which is a good number, but Wales gave up 622 meters to Argentina. To go along with this, if you look at the bottom of the slide with clean breaks, 7 clean breaks for Wales, 14 clean breaks for Argentina. So again, it's Wales' defense was not as good as myself and others are used to seeing in the past, which let Argentina just essentially run wild this game. And you can see that based off the meters gained plus clean breaks here. I will give Wales credit where credit is due on defense, because they were doing a great job turning Argentina over at the breakdown. They've got 7 turnovers won for Wales versus just 2 for Argentina. So again, despite having defense that's kind of similar to Swiss cheese, they did have some bright points in there, Wales did, by getting turnovers at the breakdown. Moving along, we're on to the one, I guess not the only high-scoring affair here, but both teams were scoring a lot of points this game. You have USA Rugby versus Georgia. Now, for everyone that's a USA fan, very happy to see the big improvement from last week to this week. Last week, USA got the pants beaten off of them really badly by Scotland. So it's nice to see USA bounce back against Georgia and actually have some form of offensive organization that was able to score against the team. So let's take a look at our stat line here. We have USA in the black ink, Georgia in the red ink. And what's interesting is Georgia was playing quite a bit of defense this game, but just like the other teams we've been seeing, when they got their ball, they were much more effective with it and much more efficient with it. So I think we can kind of see all of that with the top half of the stats here. So we've got possession and territory stats both favoring USA, which is nice to see. If you take a look at the tackles made stat here, USA is almost making 1 tackle a minute because they're only making 84 tackles during the entire course of the game versus 164 for Georgia. So again, just looking at these tackle stats here, Georgia's making significantly more tackles than USA is, showcasing Georgia is playing defense quite a bit more during this game. But if you look at the bottom stat on this slide here, meters gained, 266 meters gained for USA, 353 for Georgia. So that's almost 100 more meters gained by Georgia during the course of this game. So again, yes, Georgia is playing much more defense, which they probably prefer, but when they got that ball and were playing offense, they were very effective, very efficient with it, which just led them to more scoring opportunities and just playing a really good game. So let's move into our last game of the week here. We had the All Blacks 15 versus England A side. So let me just quickly explain these two teams here. These are teams that are, I'm going to say, like a half a step below the senior side. So these teams are really used for players that have been injured or have been on the senior side before, that are trying to prove or reprove that they do deserve and belong on that senior squad. In addition, it's also for young players that are just graduating from like the U20 level, so they're like 20 to 23, 20 to 24. Again, young players trying to prove that they can handle the intensity of international competition. Now, with that being said, I don't know if the England A team had a game last week or if this was the first game that they played during this whole test series, but we have the All Blacks 15-31, England A side 14. Let's take a peek at the stats here. And again, possession territory, not, too out of whack, not really favored towards one team or the other too much. But it's interesting that England had more possession and more territory. In addition, these tackle stats, very, very even. Tackle success is literally the exact same. Now, the question becomes, what stats can we look at to see where this difference starts to come in? Because we have a 17-point margin of victory here, right? So if we look at the bottom half here, I really want to zoom in on the meters gained. I really want everyone to focus on the meters gained at the top of the slide here. 358 meters gained for the All Blacks 15 versus 264 for England. So, we're looking at almost 100 more meters gained for the All Blacks 15 versus England A here. So, despite England having more possession, more territory, All Blacks 15 again, much more effective, much more efficient, used their offensive possession much better than England did. What I also find very interesting here is going down to the penalties conceded line, which is about halfway down. A bit of ill discipline for the All Blacks 15 compared to England A. You have 12 penalties for the All Blacks 15 versus just 4 for England A. So England A did a great job being disciplined and not giving up a lot of penalties, but they did turn the ball over and give the ball back to All Blacks 15 23 times during the course of the game. So the All Blacks 15, obviously, they used that to their advantage, increasing the meters gained, increasing offensive scoring opportunities, and potentially led to the victory for them for this week. So thank you everybody for tuning in. I hope everybody enjoys the games that are up and coming this week, and I will see you next time.